Here we have what we believe to be a Brougham carriage, and all the way back in 1838, Lord Brougham, a very rich, a very wealthy, a very influential man in England, came up with this design, and he commissioned Robinson and Cook coach builders to make the first one. And it was really, really groundbreaking. It was breathtaking. It just looked stunning. But it had lots of other attributes. It had to be agile. And it was to take the very wealthy people around. This wouldn't be your everyday car. It was for special occasions. And as I said, that agileness and all the other bits of the design, which we're going to go through, just really point towards how cutting edge it was. And we've got a lot to be getting on with. So let's start our little tour. Something that's pretty striking, apart from its beauty, is she only has 3 wheels, and you might have seen us offloading it. But the real damage, the majority of the work is all at this front end, and it's the complicated bit. It is the business end. It's got these beautiful leaf springs, there's lots of ornate woodwork, and there's all sorts of turning elements to it. Originally drawn by 1 horse from the design, but subsequently in Europe, when the French got hold of it, they wanted to really make a statement, so they probably had 2 or 4 horses, and it would have been really striking. We're very lucky. We did a little bit of investigation and we found a wheelwright, a coach builder, and he makes coaches from scratch, as does other contacts on the internet that we've seen, but he doesn't happen to live too far away. And I think he's going to tell us a lot more history about the origins of this particular carriage, because he'll be able to see on the wheels, by the design and by all the intricate steelwork, you'll be able to see it's very, very unique, and that would denote where it was made. And we don't know, but an expert like him, I'm sure he'll have his finger on the pulse. And someone mentioned in the comments that these hubcaps, they are brass, and underneath sometimes they do have the inscription of the original manufacturer, or in some cases the manufacturer of the actual axle and the hubs. And what's really interesting is that all the hubs are matched to the axle, and what we're hoping is that our wheelwright chap is going to be able to use all the bits and pieces, bit of old, bit of new, and recreate a wheel for this side, and we're going to reuse that original hub. The other problem is if we couldn't do that, we'd have to replace the axle in its entirety. So it's another little challenge. Let's get on and have a look at a bit more of the mechanics. Below the coachman and the footman's footrest is this very complicated, it's a beautiful design, very complicated bit of machinery, and it's a swash plate, and it allows the front of the carriage to turn, or a turntable. It's where most of the movement in the carriage comes from. And we've got to take it to pieces to be able to get it structurally sound, because in amongst the metal there are these lovely carved bits of wood which form that substructure, and we've then got to sort out what's on top. And the whole carriage is a beautiful mix of wood and metal which gives it its rigidity. Let's get up top and I'll show you a little bit more. Here we have the driving seats where the coachman would have sat, and if you're really, really well off, you might have had a footman to open the door and sort your luggage out. There's a little tube that runs down here, very ornate, which used to hold the driving stick. But down here we have a handle, and I'll let you guess what that's for while we get on with something very, very special. It's the perfect glove box. Not only practical, but it kept all your goodies out the way and whatever you wanted to store, but it also shows that lovely bit of steelwork which forms the main chassis of the carriage. Of course, it is the one and only, or the very necessary, brake lever, and it's very, very cleverly done. You turn this handle, and as you turn the handle, it goes on a linkage all the way down to underneath the carriage, and eventually ends up on the rear wheel, or on the actual rim of the wheel, and it's the brake pad. So if you were coming down a steep hill and you needed just to hold the carriage off the horses, this is what you'd use. And of course, if it all got a bit hairy, it was an indispensable piece of equipment. So the coachman only had his little glove box, but the lord and lady, or whoever was in there, had a steamer trunk that went on top, and it's beautifully curved to match the curvature of the roof. And you can see here where someone's put these little drawing pins in, because at one time or another I think they put a plastic cover to try and protect it. So we don't know whether it was stored outside at one time or another, or even in a barn just to protect it from any debris. But in there is the curved glass, which we're going to show you a little bit more of from the design at the front. But first of all, there's something very exciting down below. At the back of the carriage down below is where the magic happens. And we've got the traditional leaf spring underneath. We have half a leaf spring on top, which is bolted to the back of the carriage, the actual unit itself. And then underneath, we've got another leaf spring going the opposite way. And that gives the carriage movement in both directions. And it gave it that unique ride. Compared to other carriages that only had a single rigid axle and these leaf springs, it must have been like in a carriage from another world. On those bumpy streets, high or low speeds, this was the one to be in. We're just going to reposition her. We're going to take you with us to the inside. Get a feel for what it was like back in those days to be in true luxury. Everything was very, very well thought out. Nothing was done by mistake. There's some really interesting features on the inside, on the interior. There's all the window mechanisms. There's places where the curtains would have been. There's also an intercom system. It passes through the bulkhead, and it would have been where you could have asked them to do whatever it was you wanted. Stop, whatever, go, faster, slower. Very, very modern addition. There's a little peephole into the rear view window, and you could see the highwayman chasing after you, and then you get on the blower and say, don't spare the horses. But inside it would have been ultimate luxury. All this beautiful fabric with those, the same colouring that's interestingly enough on the outside with those initials. It looks like a very, very dark, almost like a navy blue with orange buttoning. And then in front we've got something very, very cute, which is, we've got the two adult seats here, but a coupe is two big seats and then two jump seats, and they're here in front. And all you have to do is you pull that up, and there's a little lever underneath which holds it in position. So when you didn't have little passengers, you could return to as it was. So more of the workings of the carriage, and we have the very modern up and down window, and when you lifted it and it got to the very top, you could move it at the bottom and it would lock it in position. And even more complicated round the front, we have the beautiful curved window. I think it's really stunning because I imagine a carriage to be quite square, quite flat at the front, and there were other mouldings on carriages, but everywhere you look there's curvatures. So you've got the curve to the side, you've got the curve underneath, and you've got the curve to the front. And that's what made it look so unique. And another very practical, or a necessity, was these lantern holders. And they would have had a pair of matching lanterns on either side, or one on one side and one on the other. We've just got to find them. That's the only thing which we didn't have at one time or another. I'm sure they're probably just laying down in a barn somewhere. But we do have all these other bits of mouldings. So that's not the biggest challenge. We've just got to keep our eye out for something that sympathetically complements what we've already got. So I hope you've enjoyed the first overview of the beautiful Carriage. And Jen and I are really looking forward to sharing that restoration process with you. It is a big challenge, but as and when we can, we're going to just turn our attention to it. And there's so much detail, and as the episodes unfold, we'll be able to share that as it goes. And also those insights, some of you guys might have ideas, and we have had comments that people have had experience, first-hand experience with all sorts of carriages, and that depth of knowledge is so invaluable. It's going to be off to the wheelwright man. We're going to take him all those photos and see if we can get a bit more information, and more importantly, get the other wheel on. I think that's the very first important step in the process. Give her back her mobility.